You are probably wondering if it's worth paying $300 for the new, lighter, prettier, and more functional Magic Keyboard by Apple. I've been using this keyboard for quite some time now with my 11-inch M4 iPad Pro, and we will go through everything that I'm liking and also not liking about it. But before we start, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy my content and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss any of my new content coming up. Okay, let's start by talking about the newly added function keys. I always thought that the function keys on the Magic Keyboard would help me be more productive and make me reach for my iPad more often instead of using my MacBook. But now that we finally have them, I have to say that I was wrong. However, the function keys do make my life easier from time to time, and by paying attention to the keys I use on my MacBook, I found that I use them in a similar way on the iPad. Let me go over each of the new keys and talk a bit about how I'm using them. Starting off with the Escape key. This is definitely a plus on this keyboard. My most common use for this key is when iPadOS tries to correct a word I'm typing, but I actually want the word spelled out the way that I just typed. Now I just hit Escape and that's it. Up until last year, I had to touch the screen to prevent iPadOS from correcting me. The display brightness keys are also among my most used ones. However, from time to time, I find myself opening the control center to adjust the brightness. I'm not sure if this is just a habit or if it's actually faster than pressing the key multiple times, but I'm still not using the keys every time. The mission control key, I just don't use at all. I'm so used to the gesture on the screen that I even forget about this key. And a quick note, I don't use this function key on my MacBook either because I have a shortcut on my mouse instead. The search and the Siri buttons I probably never used. The do not disturb button I used rarely, and the media control buttons I do use from time to time when I'm listening to music or watching YouTube. Now, my most used ones are definitely the volume buttons. I use them all the time and never open the control center to adjust the volume. As for the lock button, I probably never used it, and I can see how useful it can be in certain situations, but since I'm always working from home, I don't really see a need for it. Okay, as you saw, I do use some of the function keys on a daily basis, but, and a big but here, they did not change my overall use with the tablet. I still find myself interacting with the screen much more than I would like to. And on top of that, the added keys didn't change the fact that this is an iPad. So if you think that with the function keys you will use your tablet just like you use your MacBook, don't get your hopes up. I still think they are very good. They are a very good addition to the Magic Keyboard, but not because they will change how you use it, but because they should have been in the keyboard from the beginning. But well, Apple is Apple. Now, the Trackpad. This is probably one of the biggest differences of the Magic Keyboard for the M4 iPads when compared to other brands. We finally have haptic feedback, so even though you're pressing the trackpad, the feedback you get is from the haptic engine inside it, not because you're actually clicking something physical. This provides more accurate and even clicks throughout the whole area, not to mention that you have to worry less about dirt getting stuck underneath and making your trackpad useless. Definitely a great upgrade here. Talking about how I'm using the trackpad, I basically use it to change the pointer on the text I'm typing or to quickly switch between previously used apps. For every other gesture, I'm still reaching for the screen to do them, even for scrolling. Talking about design and aesthetics, the new Magic Keyboard does look much nicer than last year's. The top case is now made of aluminum and it looks a lot like a MacBook. The outside, however, is basically the same as the previous generation. And because it is made of the same material, this year I went with the white color, as the black one I had for the M2 iPad Pro was a dust and fingerprint magnet. Also, I don't know, but for some reason, this white version looks very vintage, probably because of the aluminum hinge contrasting with the white keys, and I really like it. Speaking of keys, the typing experience on this keyboard is great. If you like the keyboard on the new MacBooks, the Magic Keyboard will be very close to that. I really like the feel. One thing to keep in mind though is the size you choose. My iPad is the 11-inch model, and because of its size, some keys will be smaller, like the return key, for example. It's a trade-off for mobility, but if you type a lot, you might struggle at first. It's not a huge deal, you get used to it, but I thought it was worth mentioning it since I had a few issues with it. Still talking about the typing experience, the previous Magic Keyboard wasn't very good for typing on your lap. Because its base was light and the iPad was heavier, the whole setup would tilt over very easily. I still think that a MacBook is much better for this situation, but this combo has improved a lot. The base is now made of aluminum, and with the iPad Pro being lighter, it makes for a much better experience when typing on your lap. And a small but very important detail about the Magic Keyboard is the backlit keys. Like the MacBooks, the lights automatically turn on when it gets darker in the room, making it easier to see the keys. Now, before I move on, make sure to leave your thoughts down below in the comments, and if you are enjoying this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This is one of the easiest ways to support me here on YouTube. Now, a very concerning aspect of this new keyboard is the exposed aluminum hinge. I've seen many comments from people who are definitely worried about scratching the hinge or the surface where you place your keyboard. And I haven't had any issues yet, but I do take a few extra steps to ensure my desk is clean and that the aluminum hinge won't damage anything. Also, whenever I put the iPad with the keyboard in my backpack, I avoid placing it near anything that might get scratched or damaged. A quick story about scratches. A long time ago, I had a MacBook and didn't want to put a case on it because it looked so beautiful as is. One day, while I was at a coffee shop using my Mac, I didn't check how clean the table was. And after a few minutes, when I moved the laptop, I heard that horrible sound of aluminum getting scratched. It turned out a tiny grain of sand on the table had gotten under the laptop. From that day on, I always buy some kind of protection for my Macs and double check how clean the table is. All of this to say that yes, there's always a chance of the aluminum hinge getting scratched or damaging the surface of your desk. And since we're talking about the hinge, the USB-C port on it is a great addition to the whole setup. One small issue I have with it though is that whenever you close the keyboard, the USB-C port moves with the top part of the Magic Keyboard. It's not a big deal, but depending on the cable you're using, it can shift quite a bit. On my other desk, I keep an angled USB-C cable in case I want to charge my laptop or iPad, and when I close the Magic Keyboard, the direction of the cable shifts along with it. Again, it's not a huge problem, but I would love for the ports to remain stationary when closing the keyboard. But let's talk about the main question. Do I recommend this to everyone? And the answer depends on whether you already have a MacBook for typing your documents or not. If you don't, and your iPad meets most of your needs, then yes, the Magic Keyboard will be essential for you. However, if you already have a MacBook, it will depend on how you use your iPad. For example, I have an iMac, a MacBook, and an iPad. Most of the time, I use my Macs running macOS to do most of my work, including writing my video scripts. But let's say I want to go to a coffee shop to write, watch some videos, and do some light work. The iPad is perfect for this situation, and the Magic Keyboard is definitely a must-have accessory. On the other hand, most users who have an iPad and also a MacBook or Mac on their desks typically use the tablet for tablet tasks, such as using the Apple Pencil and watching online content. For this type of user, which is the vast majority, the keyboard will be a nice addition, but not essential. So, before buying, try to determine what kind of user you are and if you really need the Magic Keyboard. It is beautiful, easy to use, and pleasant to type on, but is definitely expensive.